Thanks to the Creative and Design Thinking program for sponsoring this session. And Sebastian Perry, take it away.
Thanks, Robin, and thanks, Amy. I'm Perry. You've got Sebastian here as well. Sebastian's coming from University of Stockholm, so he's the Stockholm School of Economics. We are collaborators at Stanford. A little bit on our background. We're both professors, and they always have these small titles before professors. I'm adjunct, he's associate. It just means we're lower on the totem pole here.
That's right.
Proudly so. And the key difference in our collaboration, which is I think comes across in this, is Sebastian is a researcher, and I spend more of my time teaching and running programs. So what's awesome is it's this amazing relationship where Sebastian will, we're both geeks, so let's be honest, we're both geeks, Sebastian. Sebastian will geek out and do a huge bunch of research and has some fascinating stuff. You watch the video before, he's an amazing experiments and published papers on the topic we're getting into today, which is how human beings can augment themselves using tools like AI. And with that, and then I'll apply them to classes and we'll compare notes. And I'd also like to say we love the questions. I already see the questions going. We'll do our best to answer along the way. And I can't tell you how much we both appreciated all your questions. It drove a lot of our thinking and caused us to adjust the schedule and actually do this session. And it's not on demand, it really is in reaction to the inspiration we got from so many of the questions. So with that, we're gonna get in because there's a demo portion. We'll see how that goes. We're gonna be live on stage. And with that, let's dive in, Sebastian, and show them the overview for what we're gonna go through today.
Yeah, exactly. There we are. Yeah, so that's us, a brief recap of the two of us again. So yeah, here's the overview.
Yeah. So we'll do very brief principles. We wanted to, we put a little bit of effort into responding to the tenor of questions. We'll spend a time going through a demo, and then we hope that demo will stack up a bunch of questions that allow us to make sure that we take the concepts we are covering today and be sure we pull them into your context. So we've done our best to pick a demo that's true to us. We're gonna run something and you'll see, and hopefully we will, by the end of the hour, be able to make sure that you feel confident and curious actually at the end. We're gonna survey you at the end and see if that's true. We want to inspire you to experiment with these tools and use them and understand them and dispel some myths today. So why don't you speak to a few of these? We'll just popcorn them as we go, Sebastian. This was based on your questions from last time.
Yeah, yeah. So hi again. Yeah, I mean, as Perry was saying, it was really great to hear from you, your questions, concerns as well. So we want to do our best to address those in this webinar. One of the main messages is that AI will not replace you, but there are many, and there are a couple of reasons why that is. Excuse me. So first of all, experience, right? Your own unique experience from work life, from private life, and that's something that's really hard to emulate. We'll get into that when it comes to using these tools, how to provide context. And that's something that is really, really hard for AI to do so far. The second point here, it really is a result of the first point, which is contextualization. We're going to show you some more and some less appropriate techniques on how to kind of get the AI chatbot to do what you want it to do. And so contextualization is super important there to draw on your unique experiences and perspectives to ask the right questions, basically. And the next point is agency. It's really hard to get ChatGPT to act on your behalf. I've been trying a lot. I would love to have an email assistant answer my emails, write emails, but it's really, really hard because of the experience that's super relevant to each and every email, the context that has to be provided to write an effective email that actually answers the questions and subtleties implied in the email. And also context-specific aspects like who are you emailing, at what time, and for what purpose. The next one is inference, which relates to wondering and associating about a certain topic, and making those creative leaps. Of course, generative AI, which is what we're talking about here, large language models, but this includes image generators. A lot of it is considered creative, but what we're talking about here is you actually suspending disbelief and going in completely unrelated directions. So it's a creative tool, but it's not a creative agent in that sense, we argue, right, Barry?
So yeah. These are key, and the next one is about curiosity, and I think there's some great books on this, but these are sort of uniquely human characteristics that are sort of the perplex the engineers no end, is how to be curious, how to be surprised. I mean, one of the key aspects of creativity, if you look at all the research, but also your lived experience, is your ability to notice something, be surprised by it, and be intrigued and begin to ask questions. You'll see that's required of you, given you have a surprise or you've noticed something. We're going to show you where we have found these tools are unbelievably valuable for folks to augment their creative process to generate some ideas and options. But the core inference, the noticing something, the being surprised, the asking a good question, this is thankfully still a domain of us humans for quite a while.
Yeah, and I just have to add here, the last point is supposed to say creativity. That was my human error. Apologies. So those kind of inconsistencies you would see with human agents. But the idea here, for example, coming up with an image, it took me quite some time to get that image generated by Bing Image Creator, because it would do all kinds of irrelevant stuff when I asked it to portray a human being winning over a robot. Most of them included the robot winning over the human, so it had no context and didn't really know what I was going for there. But yeah, in any case, I think those are some really important things to keep in mind with the headlines we're seeing nowadays about the AI takeover. But it does have really important implications for work life, employment. So I do think it's important to be mindful of what makes us uniquely human, but where can we accomplish even more and even be even more creative by using these tools appropriately and responsibly, of course. So this one is, I think, crucial as well. Go ahead, Barry.
It's a great article, and there's so many things we can share. And Sebastian has actually been really gracious. And I think you've got some sources and in links at the end, right, Sebastian? So you're going to get a bunch of stuff. That if you have questions about, what do I do if I want to? Somebody just asked in the chat, what could I use to use this for research? There's actually a great specialized tool that's in the glossary. So I forget, the questions are awesome and blowing up, but that was one that's in there. Oh, the hearts came up. So whoever that was, it's now buried in the comments, but that'll be there. This is just an interesting article to think about, something that Sebastian and I really share the sentiments of the author here, Krakauer, who runs the Aspen Institute. So a great think tank that deals with super complex problems. And the core premise is to think of AI as a tool. And there's some tools that we become very, very dependent on as humans, and it sort of affects our cognitive process. It sort of takes things away. The example used in the article is maps. If you use maps all the time to navigate in your digital map and you have your phone out, anytime I go to the market, I want to, put the map on, you'll eventually maybe lose your mental model of your neighborhood, or you'll lose the mental model of your city or your county or wherever you are in the world, because you're always dependent on it. Whereas it contrasts it with a really interesting bunch of studies about using abacuses that, as a mathematical tool, actually tend to enhance thinking and enhance how to structure an equation or how to think about a math problem, because you have a new mental model from the tool. Woodworking tools, things like that. There's an analogy there. And we sort of strive to, in this topic of augmentation and how to properly augment yourself using these tools, we have found there's places that these tools are really, really valuable right now. And they're not replacing, they're not taking away a cognitive process. You'll see we put them in association with our own cognitive creative process. So it's a fascinating article. The link's there, very short too, which is awesome. So it's only 4 pages, but a great one to share with folks and get into this conversation about where does it fit and what is the use case for this, and frankly, other tools I use, so that I'm still have the agency as the human. The tool's not diminishing my capacity.
Yeah, I think that's a super important point. In research, including research that I draw on, for example, I just want to acknowledge Eric Brynjolfsson at Stanford, who has done a lot of research on automation versus augmentation. I think there are different perspectives of how we leverage technology and use technology such as AI. So what you were just saying, Perry, emphasizes the importance of using it in a way that augments us, our human capabilities, and helps us accomplish our human goals, rather than, for example, replacing us entirely through automation, or even letting the technology take over the primary agency in various tasks. So again, having a human-centered approach makes much more sense and is more productive, more efficient usually. I would also see in my own research. So I think that's just a point I want to reiterate and emphasize. That's really the mindset we have about these things. It's about augmentation. And helping.
And if I look down, I'm responding to some of your questions here because we're getting to them. So that's awesome. It looks like some of the stuff in our demo is coming up within a couple minutes here. So many of you are asking some really interesting questions, and I'm taking notes, and we'll digress as we get to some of these topics in context.
Oh, that's perfect. Yeah, so coming back to comments and questions, these are, as we've said and communicated, we did an analysis of all the questions and comments we got from part 1, just to see patterns and actually walk the walk and be data driven and use AI to help us make sense of this. And what we found, we conducted sentiment analysis. So what kind of sentiment was expressed in the comments and questions, and topic modeling. So what topics were most prominent, and keyword analysis, along with using ChatGPT actually to analyze the comments and look at what were the most pressing issues and what were people most interested in seeing. So here, just for the sake of illustration, you can see the keywords here. It's about using it, which tools do we use, how do the tools work, how can they help me with my research and my ideas. And also at the bottom there in the survey, you see business, learning, better. So we picked up on a lot on the practical aspects, which has really informed our thinking and how we set up this second webinar. And here, in the words of GPT-4, the next webinar, our conclusion was that we were going to focus on dispelling myths, clarifying misconceptions, being even more interactive and exploratory, and also include hands-on exercises and provide actionable knowledge. So that's our ambition, right, Perry? That's our ambition for today's webinar.
Yeah, and I think we appreciated the comments and also by the just anxiety, and the questions had a valence of emotion that we took from it and was noticed even in the sentiment analysis as we ran it. And it inspired us, and I want to call out, Robin, Amy, and Tim for being willing to pivot and sort of come back and say, let's thing again that sort of has hopefully we don't expect to dispel sort of all anxiety and make this all great, but try to do a better job of just not breezing through things so quickly that I think we left a lot of people asking questions like, will it replace me? Will it affect my job dramatically? If so, how? Help me understand these things. And we wanted to sort of pause and go, these are amazing tools, and respect those comments and sort of go a little slower this time and run through things with a little more detail.
Yeah, absolutely right. Great. So I think it's about time to get started, right?
Yeah,
so
let's do it.
With the more hands-on or practical aspects as promised. So let's get started with prompting. Well, first of all, what is prompting?
Yeah.
Prompts are the instructions you provide the chatbot with. Oh, it can be ChatGPT, Bing, Google Bard, but prompting is your way of interacting with chatbots.
And it's prompting is an ing word on purpose. It's not a single prompt. This is one of the things we get from students is, I tried to use, ChatGPT. A couple of you are asking about sort of policies and procedures, and I think we'll talk about that. We always ask our students to be clear that anytime they've used AI, they just need to be clear when they're submitting something, I used it, and I'm responsible for the sources and responsible for the content. The content is mine. It's not, I can't blame something else, a tool I used. So that's just a digression on a bunch of questions that were coming up in chat. Yep. And one of the things I see, Sebastian, over and over, I know you do as well, is our students tend to ask a single question, get a single answer, and say, well, that wasn't that valuable. And somebody was asking about, I can ask ChatGPT, who is Joe Biden, or who is this question? And you'll get one answer, and the answer might be good for your purposes. Prompting is an interaction. You're going back and forth, and we have a world-class expert in Sebastian in all of his research. So he's going to run through the prompting and show us how we actually have an interaction that we will play out publicly about some work on a class, and how it can be helpful to do that, and how it takes effort, and prompting is a multiple interaction effort to get to some effective content.
That's right, exactly. And no, I think you captured really well. So just to expand a little on the points you raised there, it's all about the prompting. I would say one of the most, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but an important thing to keep in mind is that it's not a database. It's not going to provide you with one-to-one answers that are accurate necessarily in response to the questions you ask or the prompts that you use. But to just come back to the first bullet point here, I would say low effort or inadequate prompts are going to get you subpar results. So the quality of answers to a very large extent it depends on appropriate use in appropriate context, but also the quality of the prompts that you submit. And so what are quality prompts is an obvious question. Well, one aspect is to actually iterate and provide more context and clarity to convey your intentions to the chatbot, to help it understand where you're coming from. Because a lot of that relies on intangible knowledge and contextualization, as we talked about before, something that we humans are still, I would say, uniquely able to do. So helping it along the way. Some other approaches that are useful are the ones we covered in the first part of this webinar series. So interactive prompting, I just mentioned, cross-domain to help come up with innovative, unexpected solutions to problems, and also contrarian prompting to just help the generative aspects of this creative technology to come up with new suggestions. And that means that you're going to have to iterate and put in the work to actually convey, to explain what it is you want to accomplish, and tell it, for example, hey, paragraph 2 or idea number 3 in the bullet points list was great. Tell me more about that. So putting in the work, actually. Another technique, which is very simple, practically speaking, is chain of thought prompting. So these tools are generative. They are not databases. They do not rely on a formal logic. So help it become more logical is something you can do by using chain of thought prompting. So it's as easy as using the term, take it step by step, or let's take this step by step. Then you force it to reason in a more elaborate way. And that often helps, for example, in terms of transparency and how it reasons, quote unquote, or how it comes up with solutions to your problems. The second aspect we already mentioned now a couple of times, but it's one of the most common mistakes I see in practice among students, among executives. It's not a database. It's not a tool for you to look up facts or references or definitions. Whenever you get those things, you need to double check them yourself.
Yeah.
This is more about the generation of ideas. It generates language that is coherent and compelling, but that's not the same thing as generating truth or facts. And that distinction is super important to enable appropriate use cases. So I realize I'm repeating myself, but I think this is just such a crucial point to keep in mind when you use these tools. It's not Google, it's not Wikipedia, it's not a database. It's a creative tool. And that's why we focus on the creative aspects. And lastly, as a result of these first 2 points, it works best for topics you are familiar with, which in practice, I see people using it a lot for domains or questions where they're not very knowledgeable. And actually, I find it more useful myself in my own topics of research and helping me construct seminars, because I can evaluate the output better. And I can actually elicit better responses. I can craft better prompts. And I can also spot when it makes mistakes, because I know that certain reference does not exist. So if I forget to be critical, then that reminds me that, okay, that makes no sense because research has this or that conclusion or come up with these results. So actually, it's a better decision support tool for you in the domains you know best. So I think those are some super important principles to keep in mind. So in terms of more concrete techniques, we were just talking about prompt engineering, which refers to the practice of crafting better prompts to provide AI chatbots with better instructions for it to help you better. So we will be engaging in prompt engineering together in just a minute or two. Secondly here, as we mentioned, again, being clear and specific about your requests is such a crucial part of prompt engineering. You need to provide it with context, background information, examples, to help break down complex questions. Again, here, chain of thought.
That's trial and error. So one thing, Sebastian, is being clear, and that's trial and error, meaning neither one of us that are using this all the time, and we'll actually show there's a couple of, that cool example of you comparing 2 articles, which we'll show in your history. A couple of questions came up about different use cases. You'll see that this, even for us, and we got together and we did a bunch of practices and shared screens and did all this stuff. We had trouble. I mean, sometimes it's 3 prompts and we're kind of, wow, I've got something useful for this particular challenge I was having, writing something. And I've got some useful material. Sometimes I have to step away and come back. It's just like the creative, I find it very much mimics creative process. Come back a day or 2 later and pick it up again and say, I just was asking questions that didn't get anywhere didn't get useful output. It's like brainstorming. I could sit down with Sebastian or one of you all and say, I want to brainstorm a bunch of topics for titles for a lecture I'm giving. We don't have a good brainstorm. You walk away. We're not asking the right questions. We don't have the right prompts. We don't know the right how might we question about brainstorming. And it's very similar. So you'll see us sort of hopefully stumble a bit. Maybe you're going to be in the Q&A giving us a couple ideas about the ways to prompt. But it's multiple efforts. It's not a one and done, or you get good at it and you ask 3 questions and you've always got an answer. That's not the expectation we want to leave you with. Absolutely.
Again, coming back to principles, you were just saying this, you were emphasizing this exact point of experimenting, trying different prompt structures, seeing what works. So there's an intuition, there's an art to prompt engineering as well here, that you simply, for all the prompt engineering tips or secret guides you might find on the internet, there really is no secret sauce. I think it's useful to rely on these principles, but then it's about, boldly experimenting and trying ideas, trying your craziest ideas, and to come up with new ways and new solutions, and just basically interviewing it as you would interview a colleague or a client or someone else. And then again, the same thing goes there. You need to be clear and you need to ask really good questions. So it's a new kind of challenge. It's a new kind of skill working with these tools, which will enable you to remain competitive. And using these tools is just a matter of training and experimenting. And I guess that's one of the takeaways that we want to convey today. Okay, So I think, Perry, are we ready to
Go
fire
ahead
up ChatGPT? Okay.
With that, let's do a quick tour. So explain what folks are looking at.
Yeah, so I'm logged in to my account here on OpenAI's ChatGPT interface. As you can see here, I have a Plus subscription, which means that I have access to different models. I have priority.
And how did you get there? So a couple asked, like, how do you get there? How do you get to ChatGPT? How do you get to OpenAI? You could Google it, and you'll go to create an account, and you can create an account. ChatGPT 4 you pay for. The ChatGPT 3 is open.
Yeah, that's it. So just to make this relatable, we were thinking most of you are probably using 3.5, the free version. So that's one we'll use for now. Maybe we'll switch over for GPT-4 for the sake of illustration, but we'll stick with 3.5 for now. And here is a history, my own history. And actually, this is, you made a good point, Perry, before. This is a great knowledge repository for me to go back to my own, my chat history and the results and outputs that I've submitted. And I actually do. I didn't even reflect on that, but this is something I go back and check regularly. When I'm, because the same kind of challenges keep reappearing or popping up, and then this is a great reference. So this is my chat history basically, and here you see the model that's chosen. So this one, as it says here, is the fastest model, great for most everyday tasks, and that's the one we'll be using for now.
So then we got a question. We'll do a twofer. We got a question, and this will also demonstrate what is here on the left and how you might use it. So one was, a couple of people ask, is ChatGPT something I could use to compare, say, two articles, and help me understand the similarities and differences? So do you want to pull up? We were perusing your past sessions. Do you want to pull up that one where you compared two articles?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was actually, this was for a task I had just recently, where I was asked to write up a book recommendation. And here I was kind of struggling to get started. So I used ChatGPT to help me with this. So let me see here. I think it was this one I used to integrate the two book recommendations I got. So if you give me a second, I'm just going to find, here it is, the original conversation. Yes, so here for the book review and book recommendation article, I think it's going to pop up in just a second. I ask it here because I decided on which two books I wanted to recommend. And then my prompt here is compare and contrast what these two books have to say about AI and how to make good decisions.
Hi, Sebastian, one thing.
Yeah.
Sebastian, this is Robin. So we're seeing a screen right now that is your empty ChatGPT prompt. It says at the bottom, we can see your history on the left. So we're not seeing any of this. Okay, good. Thanks for letting me know. I think I'll just stop share and reshare again. So hopefully it shows you what I'm seeing. So yeah, let's try that out. We can work through it. There we go. Perfect.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so again, I'm asking you here to compare and contrast what these two books have to say. So I picked Noise by Danny Kahneman and colleagues, and I picked How to Stay Smart in a Smart World by Gert Gigerensers. They have a very contrasting perspective on human rationality. And one of them emphasizes how biased we are, and the other one emphasizes that, well, our intuition can actually be useful, and they derive different conclusions and talk about algorithms and AI in very different ways. So I wanted to jointly recommend them to get different perspectives. And here, it provides me with just that, an article, an outline, which is generic. It's not the way I would write it, and it's a bit superficial. But it's a starting point. And this helped me actually very quickly get started. And what I did in the next step here is that I used another version from a previous conversation. On the left, you'll see it just further down there. I used it to integrate the two versions and write an even better recommendation article. And then I further refined it. So that's just a very simple example of how you can use it.
Yeah, so it goes to the two sides of, we're not going to really cover today. We're gonna go to the prompting, and I don't know, Sebastian, you might have to do after each prompt reshare if it's not dynamic your screen. But the key here, and you folks were asking about this, is it is a really amazing thing to compare, and that's another area that we could get into and maybe do another session. Is like the two uses we teach a lot around are, for example, what we did with questions from the last sessions, because we had so many. We helped, AI helped us analyze that and look for patterns and look for things maybe that we didn't notice. Great use case. This is a great use case. The other thing is just the usability of ChatGPT, and it shows you even how prompting happens, or these sessions can happen over many, many days. So this is a repository on the side, and you've got all these past inquiries you've done, and then we can go back and even use and cut and paste, and we'll show you how it works in a single session. But let's go ahead and that maybe answers a few folks were asking about that and asking
one
about
thing.
how it works.
Yeah, sorry, I just saw a comment here as well by Melissa. When asking ChatGPT to review two articles, is it beneficial to assume that it has already read, quote unquote, the content? That's a great question. So what I'm doing here is that I actually paste most of the article that I had from the previous step, or I would paste, a synopsis or a summary of the book. If it's an older book, before then, it would probably have access to the contents, or at least reviews of the book from previously from the internet. But if it's a very recent book, ChatGPT will not have that in its training data. So then I actually provide it with excerpts or relevant content. Or as someone else was asking, you can use, for example, Bing AI, or you can use ChatGPT with browsing internet access. And then it can actually get that information itself relating to the book and what it's about. But here I do, what I usually do is I simply paste relevant information in the as a part of the prompt.
Yep.
Right. So and here I think I also wanted to just show you here. I start this prompt coming back to the iteration aspect. I prompted here to rewrite more stringently, incorporate the following background, illustrating the extent to their disagreements. And that's part of this very long iterative process where I work with ChatGPT. So I kind of become an editor in how I work with ChatGPT.
Yeah. And how do you, a bunch of questions are coming up, and then let's get to so maybe as I pose this to you, go ahead and get ready for the session where we're going to do the our interactive prompting. How do you cite references? So what do you do? So now say you've got some summary, and there's a summary paragraph in there, and you're not sure whether to cite it or not. What do you do?
Yeah. So citing in terms of
yeah, like you don't know if you have to quote. It could be one of these sentences is an actual quote from it's not a summary based on a bunch of different comments that's maybe in the public domain. Yeah. You just have some concern that this is a great paragraph. I want to literally drop it into a slide and use it. Yeah. I personally have the students do some of the same things they've always done, which is check that paragraph for references.
Yeah.
But how do you go about that? Is the question. Like what happens? You copy and paste that into something else. Are you using? The question is, are you asking the ChatGPT, is this an appropriate use of these materials, or can you cite anything, or do you use another resource to do that?
Yeah. Okay. Great question. There's a couple of different ways I would answer it. So for students, I strongly urge them to be transparent about everything they do. And then another issue is, I don't think we use the term hallucinations, but ChatGPT can, or other large language models are prone to hallucination, meaning that they make things up. As we were talking about before, it's not a fact generator. It generates language, and language that is coherent happens to coincide with facts most of the time, but not all the time. So that's why you have to be very vigilant in how you use the tool. And that means that you can get inaccurate information. So you should have an idea of what the books are about. I mean, I know the books well, but using this to write about books I don't know about very well, I wouldn't really feel confident doing that. Another aspect to avoid plagiarism is that I kind of put the final touches on the article myself. Obviously, I rewrite it in a style that I feel resonates with the audience and is natural for me, because I want it to be my article. And then lastly, I think if you're using a model that's connected to the internet, I don't know if my screen is still frozen. Oh, it looks like it is frozen. So, but if you go to...
So let's run through the demo of you creating an email and how you might use it. And then we'll go. And a lot of you are asking questions about, where's the source data? Can we get on the internet? I'm doing my best to respond and say, well, I wanted to answer some of those questions in context, because that example of comparison, and we're not covering the AI's ability to compare. It's a fabulous use case. That was sort of a twofer. And also a few of you are asking about the basically like, what is it? Where is it? How do I get on ChatGPT? Some really basic questions, and didn't want to sort of fly by. Hey, we're in ChatGPT. Well, I don't know how to get on. So things like that. But what's going to happen is Sebastian has a class coming up in the fall, and he has a new topic for that class. And legitimately, we were just having this conversation. He wanted to ask for some help from colleagues, including me. So I said, hey, give me more information. So this is real. This is live. He needs to write me a note I can think about. We're both busy with the end of our school years, and asynchronously think about what he's up to. And he's got to write me a note. So this would be an email that he'd sit down. And how long would you spend preparing an email like that? A while. You're super busy. You've got a lot going on. So then take it away and just maybe verbalize what you're up to. And your screen's not running, so we're seeing it run live. So read out the prompt you gave it.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so here I'm just starting very simply by saying I'm writing an email to a colleague. I want him to help me with a course in the fall. Help me write an email to get him to help me with the course. So that's a very generic, basic way of asking. So here you see it spits out a long email, and here it has some placeholders for me to fill in, area 1, 2, 3. And it's just basically, and also placeholder here, course name that I would fill in. So this one is a placeholder for Perry's name. So here you see already how much context is left out. It doesn't really know what I want, and it's too long as well. So then I would start iterating, right? So I would say—
go ahead and drop questions if you got them along the way, or contributions.
Sorry, what's that?
I'm just saying for folks in the public, like if you have contributions or questions, the Q&A, I can see that live as Sebastian's deep in the demo.
So now I'm saying that my colleague's name is Perry. The course is about entrepreneurship and use of AI to enable augmentation. I am thinking about calling it the augmented entrepreneur. And make the email shorter. So let's see what that does. So it's still too long. So I'm going to have to specify probably that it should only be 2 paragraphs, because I don't think Perry has time to read the whole thing. But it says here, it's already—
from your creative process now, what are you getting from this? So let's sort of break it down. You're trying to communicate with a colleague. You have a complex topic. There's a lot going on. So what do you even just verbalize what goes on in your head as you see these contributions the AI is making?
Right. So here, for example, it says, focuses on the intersection of entrepreneurship and AI-enabled augmentation, given your expertise in the field. So now it's already, helping me or reminding me that I should actually emphasize why am I asking for Perry's help with this. And I would appreciate your assistance and mentorship, which is also very appropriate, because I'm looking to, get Perry's, valuable insights and help when it comes to entrepreneurship aspects and how digital technology fits into that. And again, here it goes on saying as an accomplished professional in entrepreneurship. So it kind of knows already, that you're very knowledgeable in entrepreneurship. So I'm probably going to need to, emphasize those aspects. And then here it gets very concrete in what I'm actually asking. So that's also another, it's prompting me to be more specific.
Yeah. So what does that drive your thinking? Like, are you getting clearer? Your cognitive process, creative process it strikes me as, I want to put words in your mouth, but verify this or not. You're becoming clear what is the email going to do and not going to do. So you maybe are making a decision now, wait, should I be asking Perry about the details or should I be asking him about these things? Now, it's your job is, prompting. And as the clock goes, you spent maybe, minus our yammering, 2 minutes on this. And you're sort of sorting out, you're thinking about what the email's about even, is what I would say.
Yeah. That's true, because it's a blank canvas when I'm starting. I don't have any particular thoughts as to how exactly I should craft the email. So it's an exploration basically, together with ChatGPT to take these shortcuts that you're mentioning. That's how I would try to describe it basically.
So now, where does your prompting take you in the next stage here? What are you seeking to accomplish with this body of work now?
So now I'm trying to be basically the things that I took away from the last round, the last version, is to be more concrete, emphasize why I'm turning to you for help, and also be trying to say what is it specifically I'm asking for. And now I shortened it to these 3 paragraphs. I actually asked for 2 paragraphs. I got 3, but it's getting there. And here it's about the integration, and it's saying that, deeply, it's putting here, this one is actually putting words in my mouth. I'm deeply passionate about entrepreneurship. So I guess that's compelling, and excited to delve into the practical application. That's something because I mentioned here that you're very knowledgeable in entrepreneurship and working with entrepreneurs and executives. So here it's, again, emphasizing also the practitioner side, which I do actually want to incorporate in the course, but I don't think that's something that would have occurred to me right away.
Yep. All right.
So yeah, it's kind of a crude.
It's provoking your thinking. It's helping you clarify what it's about. And it's, what I found is, so we have students preparing in the accelerator launchpad, preparing pitches, for example, and they'll put in components of their pitches. How am I going to talk about a go-to-market strategy for my business? They'll give a brief background on the business and say, how might I explain this in 3 bullet points? At some point, they take this and they move to another medium. So what I don't think, Sebastian, at least I think I always feel the sense that your emails are ultimately written by you. You'll ultimately take components of this and begin to rework it in your Gmail or whatever email server. You'll author it yourself using components or ideas from this session. Or you'll find out things you didn't do that you won't do in your actual email to me.
Yeah. That's
so. Sebastian, one question is, we're getting a lot of questions. Where does the information go? So let's say you put in a lot of information about your class that's, you know, some of it's in public domain, right? So it's not such a concern as it doesn't matter. It's on the school I work for, it's on the website. So if I wanted to reference some of that material, it's already out there being scraped by Google and other people. But let's say you had a really brand new idea, you know, for what was going to happen in this class, or a particular exercise you wanted to do, or something you were getting into some details. What happens to information you put into ChatGPT or an AI in your prompting? What happens? Is it now public domain? What happens to it?
Right. Yeah. So that's also here. Just I think my screen froze. I was just showing how to invoke some step-by-step reasoning to make it more compelling. Yeah. So here this goes to OpenAI. The prompts and the responses go to the organization OpenAI, who developed or are developing GPT and ChatGPT, and they use it, I would assume, for further training and refinement of the models. So that's why there have been stories about, you know, employees, companies leaking or inadvertently disclosing secret information, confidential information in these chatbots. So that's why it does make sense to keep this in mind. There is a setting, I think it's for the Plus plan, where you can make your chat history, or the prompts that you can disable chat history in training temporarily, but I would still be cautious, right?
Yeah, so what you put in, the question is coming up, like what you do put in is, you're putting it out there, and the AI is going to use that to give other people better answers and amalgamate it, and goes to the challenge of primary sources. And a few of you are asking, what are our policies? I actually give Sebastian credit for this, which is, you know, my new policy from Sebastian and from his class, and the school he works at, is being clear that students now cite all of the tools they use. So if they're using ChatGPT, I just asked that they say they use ChatGPT a bit in preparing this. If they used Figma, I asked that they use Figma, which is a no-code graphic building. So they build prototypes with that of apps and whatnot. And it seems kind of silly that I just didn't do that before, because it's great for me to learn, what are they using? What questions do they have? What are the latest techniques, you know, they're as they put together their work, and then taking responsibility for what has your name on it. You ultimately have responsibility for figuring out if there's a primary source that needs to be cited, if something like that. And you can use, you know, there's a few folks in the Q&A that have been posting questions that have suggestions of resources, and there's some things at the end of the presentation that you'll have, that thanks to largely the work Sebastian did in one of his classes, that are great resources for this kind of thing. Hey, I wanted to pause for a second, because there's been I don't want to skip this question. A few people early on commented, there's been, you know, Sam Altman's comments to Congress in the United States, alarmist comments about the future of AI. It must be regulated. We need a little bit of supervision. This is potentially dangerous as it develops technology in the future. How do you think about that, Sebastian? I think you've got more experience with the technology and the current state of it, and also the research happening, than I do. But they're asking about these alarmist comments relative to, we're sort of saying, hey, use these tools to be creative in these particular use cases. Why don't you back up a step and address, what are the comments getting made, and how does it relate to where the technology is today?
Yeah, I think the exercise we just did shows just how much manual work is involved when it comes to complex communication between human beings. Also, these uniquely human traits we talked about, I think, shows that the technology still has some ways to go, but that doesn't mean that it's not something that should be taken very, very seriously, because we're seeing exponential increases in the capabilities that these models have. But just from a everyday practical perspective, the focus, you know, in my work has largely revolved around how do we, as employees, as business people, as researchers, adapt, because that's the history of information technology and technology in general. It changes work and how we collaborate, and so I think that's just something to keep in mind about how do I adapt and how do I learn to leverage these tools. I mean, there's a saying that it's not going to replace you, but someone with ChatGPT might replace you. So
I think there's a few questions like that. Like it's frightening. One individual is saying it's frightening if your colleagues are using ChatGPT and you're not, and maybe you need to catch up. And I'd say we feel passionate about equipping our students to be productive and pursue the interests they have and have a great career in any field. And Sebastian, I do share that it's really important that they learn about these tools, and we're transparent about learning about things like citing sources. I'm chatting with Sebastian about what should I need to have a policy. I need to actually talk about this and have a working policy for my class. And Sebastian was really helpful and help with that. So these conversations are ongoing. And at the core, we do feel, and the reason we came back on and did this is we really want all of you to feel comfortable exploring this and understand how to use it and the ways that we've seen it be really, really effective and have some great results for unleashing creativity. You could flip around our demo, and Sebastian could have done a nefarious email trying to get me to, wire him money, or whatever. I'm being facetious, but he could have done something that was about, something that's not ethical, and he could have had ChatGPT help with that. It's the computer doesn't know the difference. We chose an example that's really something sincere and an example of something that's allows Sebastian, in this case, to augment himself. He deeply cares about this class in fall. He deeply cares about having good collaborators, and he deeply cares about writing a thoughtful email to them. Me amongst other colleagues, he's going to recruit for this. And he's really busy. He doesn't want to miss something. He wants to write a good email that's thoughtful, and using this as a tool to generate options is the key message of this. Not as an answer, not as, hey, do my emails to these 5 colleagues and send them on my behalf. One other question, and this example demo doesn't quite lend itself to you, but let's say on that first demo when you were comparing, I forget the 2 books, Noise, the Danny Kahneman book, and the other book. Let's say you made a decision, and this will come to a bunch of comments about what has access to the internet and what doesn't. Let's say you said, I know I want to buy the Danny Kahneman book, Noise. Great, I want to buy it for a class, and I'm going to have to buy 20 copies.
Yep.
Can the AI you're in right now go tell you what the prices are and where to get it cheap? Could you prompt it? Or are there other AIs that have access to the internet that you want to be using?
Yeah, so I mean, the knowledge cutoff for the non-internet browsing enabled version does not have up-to-date information, and it can't check in real time. So if I ask it now, it won't be able to say that. It will probably speculate. But if I'm using the chatbots with internet, then they can.
I see here that what's one with internet access? Would that be Bing? Would have internet access?
Yeah, that would be Bing. Or for example, it would be this one here. I'm hoping my screen doesn't freeze. But
people say it freezes and unfreezes, but you'll eventually get it. But the point here is that you do need to ask that question. A few of you have been asking. I found it's a great resource, and a couple times I'll get data that's a little bit old and speculative. It's not really useful. I'm trying to quickly get something done, and I go, oh, I'm in a AI that's really helpful at writing and really giving them great ideas, but it's not going to be helpful at a task that I wanted some help with. And anyway, that's food for thought. That came up a bunch in the chat.
Yeah, so I think time is flying again. I just thought we would give it one last shot to write you an email that has some personality. Good. So I prompted it here to make it shorter, 1 paragraph, add some humor, and use my syllabus from last year. So I'm giving it some more context here. This is the syllabus for the course last year, but we're gonna revamp it completely. So here it says, help me unlock the digital universe with humor and expertise. Hey, Perry, hope you're rocking the entrepreneurial world. I'm reaching out with a hilarious request for your mentorship in the Augmented Entrepreneur course. I aim to achieve superhuman abilities such as. So I think, I don't know if you find this compelling, but no, if you do, might use this email and send it to you later and hope you can help me.
Awesome. I can't wait to read it. With that, I think, Robin, are we at time?
Hi, we're 2 minutes out from time.
Okay, so let's make sure before you all leave, we did want to, Amy's got a survey. We wanted to get a balance on if this is making you sort of more confident to use these tools, less confident, more anxiety, and feel free to give us information and feedback, because we strive to, we are passionate about helping you use these tools and share with you really our active work and what we're actively working on right now. And I'm loving the feedback. We're up to 100 and something questions, which is awesome. And we read every single one of them. So thank you. And we want the information.
Yeah, same. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Perry. Thank you, Sebastian, very much. I think what's really interesting is I think that what we're going to see in the future is people are going to become prompting savvy. And that's something that's going to be on your resume. That's what it's going to say. It's going to say ability to prompt for this role and this task and this thing. And as you said, Sebastian, it's about you'll be, AI is not going to make us irrelevant. It's going to be people who don't use AI. So I thought that was very timely and a good note to finish on. Everyone in the audience, thanks so much for joining and all the interaction, because it's you that make these sessions so great. Perry and Sebastian, thanks again for being here. And if you're interested in more creative content, then we've linked the Creativity and Design Thinking program in your dashboard. And for everyone here and everyone watching later, we'll be sending out a recording within 1 week. Thanks everybody for coming, and signing off from Stanford.